I had always thought the woods held a certain mystery, an allure that called to the adventurer in me. So when the opportunity arose to go camping deep in the heart of the old forest, I couldn't resist. The ancient trees, the untouched paths, the isolation from the bustling noise of the city. It was exactly the escape I needed. The first day was everything I had hoped for. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of pine and earth. I hiked for hours, reveling in the solitude and the beauty of nature. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, I found a perfect spot to set up camp. A small clearing with a view of the stars that promised to be spectacular. But as night enveloped the woods, the atmosphere changed. The comforting silence of the day gave way to a cacophony of nocturnal sounds. Rustling leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, the occasional snap of a twig that seemed too deliberate, too close. I told myself it was just the forest settling for the night, just the creatures that called it home going about their business. I settled into my tent, the fatigue of the day lulling me into a restless sleep. That's when the dreams started, vivid and disturbing. They were filled with shadows that whispered and eyes that watched from the darkness. I woke with a start, the remnants of the nightmare clinging to my consciousness. That's when I heard it. The soft, unmistakable sound of footsteps outside my tent. Not the random steps of an animal, but the measured pace of something or someone. I held my breath, listening as the steps circled around, pausing now and then as if contemplating. My heart raced, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination, a side effect of the dream. But then, a shadow fell across the canvas of the tent, and I knew I was not alone. The shadow lingered, a dark blot against the thin fabric of the tent. I could hear my own heartbeat, a frantic drum in the silence of the night. I had to make a decision, stay still and hope whatever was outside would lose interest, or confront it. Gathering every ounce of courage, I decided to face my fear. I slowly unzipped the tent, the sound deafening in the quiet. The cool night air hit my face as I peered out, my eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. There was nothing. The clearing was empty, the trees standing like silent sentinels around me. I stepped out, my flashlight cutting through the blackness, casting long, eerie shadows. The light flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing at the edge of the woods, a figure that was too tall, too thin, and too still to be human. I blinked, and it was gone. Had it been real, or just a trick of the light, a phantom conjured by my frazzled nerves? I couldn't tell, but the feeling of being watched remained, a palpable presence that I couldn't shake off. I decided not to sleep anymore that night. I built a fire, the flames casting a comforting glow around the campsite. I sat there, watching the woods, waiting for dawn. The hours passed slowly, each minute stretching out endlessly. As the first light of morning broke through the trees, I felt a sense of relief. The terror of the night began to fade, seeming less real in the light of day. I packed up my camp, eager to leave the forest and its unseen watchers behind. But as I shouldered my backpack and turned to leave, I noticed something that stopped me cold. A set of footprints encircling my campsite, too large to belong to any animal I knew. They led off into the woods, disappearing into the thick underbrush. I followed them, curiosity overcoming my fear. The trail led me deeper into the forest, to a place where the trees grew so dense that little sunlight reached the ground. And there, in a small clearing, I found it, a circle of stones with charred remnants of a fire at its center. Around the circle were markings, symbols that I didn't recognize, but that filled me with an inexplicable dread. It was a place of rituals, of ceremonies that were not meant for the eyes of the uninitiated. I realized then that the forest held secrets, ancient, dark secrets that were best left undisturbed. I left the clearing quickly, the feeling of being watched returning with a vengeance. I didn't stop until I was out of the woods, back in the safety of my own world. But even now, when the night is dark, and the wind whispers through the trees outside my window, I wonder about that place in the woods and about the things that walk there when the sun goes down. I hope you enjoyed this continuation. If you'd like more, feel free to ask. The forest had a heartbeat. At least, that's what my grandpa used to say. As a kid, I thought it was just one of his old tales. But standing here, alone, with the sun dipping below the tree line, I could feel it, a thumping rhythm beneath my feet, as if the very ground was alive. I set up camp by a small brook, the water babbling like quiet laughter. The fire crackled to life, its glow warding off the creeping chill of the evening. I roasted some marshmallows, their sweetness a stark contrast to the bitter cold that settled in with the darkness. Night in the woods is a different kind of silence. It's heavy, filled with whispers of rustling leaves and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. I zipped up my tent, the nylon barrier thin and flimsy, a poor shield against the vast wilderness that surrounded me. I woke to the sound of footsteps. Not the soft tread of deer, but the deliberate, heavy footfalls of something bipedal. My heart raced as I reached for the flashlight, its beams slicing through the pitch black. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, a low growl, a sound no human could make, rumbled just outside. I don't know how long I stayed frozen, the light shaking in my hand. When I finally dared to look, the night had reclaimed its quiet. But the ground outside told a different story. Footprints circled my tent, large and deep, with claw marks that dragged between each step. As dawn broke, I packed up hastily, the thrill of the hike lost to a primal urge to flee. But every rustle in the bushes, every snap of a twig, sent jolts of fear through me. I was no longer a visitor here. I was prey. I never saw what stalked me that night. But sometimes, when the city is quiet, I can still hear that growl, feel the forest's heartbeat, and I know some tales are more than just stories. The forest was alive with whispers, and as I hurried along the path, the sense of being followed grew stronger. Every shadow seemed to move. Every tree appeared to watch me pass. The once familiar trail now felt like a labyrinth, each turn leading me deeper into uncertainty. I reached a clearing, and for a moment, I thought I had escaped the oppressive atmosphere of the woods. But then I saw it. A tent, much like mine, abandoned and torn. The fabric was shredded. The poles snapped like twigs. Whatever had visited me last night had been here too. A journal lay among the debris, its pages scattered by the wind. I gathered them. Curiosity piqued despite the fear. The entries were frantic, the handwriting shaky. The camper had seen something that shouldn't exist outside of nightmares. They wrote of eyes that glowed in the dark, of a presence that was both there and not there, a creature of shadow and malice. I should have left then, should have run until the forest was a memory. But I needed to know. The last entry spoke of a place where the trees bent away, as if in fear, where the ground was blackened and nothing grew. A place the camper believed was the heart of the forest's darkness. I found it by following the crows. They circled above, their caws loud and harsh. The trees did bend away, and the ground was scorched earth. In the center, a pit, deep and wide, with edges that looked like they had been melted by intense heat. I peered into the abyss, and for a moment, I saw something move. A shape too large to comprehend, a mass of writhing darkness. The air grew cold, and I felt a pull, a desire to jump, to join whatever dwelled below. I stumbled back, the spell broken by a sharp pain in my leg. I had been cut, a small wound, but it was deep, and I hadn't felt it happen. Blood dripped onto the scorched ground, and as it did, the whispers grew louder, angrier. I ran. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs ached. I didn't stop until I burst from the tree line, into the light of day, and the gaze of shocked onlookers. They asked questions, but I had no answers. I only had the journal, the entries that ended abruptly, a story without an ending. I never went back to the forest, but sometimes, when the night is still, I hear whispers on the wind, and I wonder if the forest is calling me, beckoning me to return to the heart of its darkness.